YouTube family, what's going on? It's your boy back with another one, and I just want to weigh in real quick on this topic I've been seeing a lot on here, basically about the ammo crisis and all the panic buying and stuff like that. I made a video a couple months back. If you haven't watched that video, go check that video out now. Basically talking about why I only buy cheap ammo and mostly FMJ and things like that. And then I also made a video about how much ammo you should always keep. And those videos will be relevant to today's video because we got a lot of stuff going on right now. A lot of people talking about, scare crisis with this ammo stuff. A lot of things that's taking place in the world now that's affecting that. Plants being shut down. Foreign companies taking over large ammunition companies, buying them out. And I know a lot of that stuff has an effect on how scarce ammo can get afterwards. And as far as the panic buying, this is the reason why I always say you should always be stocking up on ammo throughout the years, throughout the year. Don't just wait for something to hit the fan. Because the pandemic, for an instance, back in 2020 when that happened, what happened? Everybody was ransacking shelves just because they said we needed toilet paper and masks, and everything was out of stock. You couldn't find anything, Eventually it got down to where people thought, hey, it's the end of the world situation. And next thing you know, ammo was getting ransacked. Guns were getting ransacked. There was nothing on the shelf. You couldn't find anything back in 2020, let alone ammo or anything related to that. Everything was gone. The worst of the worst was getting bought out. And so when it came down to it, cheap ammo or, so-called bad ammo didn't even matter because it was better to have it than to have nothing sitting in your stockpile. And that's one of the reasons why I made that video. But as I said, it would be relevant to today's video because it has a lot to do with what's going on. But there's a lot of things taking place. For instance, we got war going on over there in Israel. A lot of things like that going on. Like I said, plants getting shut down. A lot of foreign companies taking over big American companies, as I said already. Things like that all basically comes into play when it comes to, ammo supplies. And at the end of the day, I didn't know much about the Lakeside plant. I had got the news about it like a week ago, basically saying that they were going to shut it down and close it out to any, the civilian market, basically. Anyone, that's not government or military contracted. So I do believe the research that I did on it, that plant supplies is the biggest supplier for the military and the government. So they supply them with pretty much all the 5.56 ammo. And as we know, 5.56 and 223 is one of the most popular calibers you can get out there. And that's probably going to become scarce if all this information is correct and true, which I do believe it is, because there's a lot of sources out there reporting on the same thing. But as I said, guys, it is a big plant and it supplies, I believe, over 30% of the market, the civilian market, which 30% is a big chunk, whether you know it or not. Might not seem like it, but even as you can see now, you can go online and check all the big gun websites, and there's not a whole lot of ammo choices, especially for 5.56 and 223. I went to the gun show the other day and spoke to a guy, one of the vendors, and he said that just a couple weeks ago, he had a bunch of pallets sitting around of 5.56, and it's all gone now. And he actually said that he wished that he would have held on to some of it for his own personal use because now it's scarce. It's getting more scarce, for better words. You're not going to find it as often. But yeah, Lakeside basically supplies 30% to the civilian market. And being as though that they're going to shut it down to the civilian market, then that's a big supplier, so you won't see it on a lot of shelves anymore, which is Winchester. You won't be seeing that on the shelves as much, if that really happens. So that's why I always say it's good to always buy ammo when you can, and always make sure you stock up on not just Winchester, but any ammo for that matter. It doesn't matter at the end of the day because this to me is considered a SHTF situation, when it hits the fan, which is, one of the situations where you want to be stocked up with ammo because if it's another situation like 2020 all over again, there won't be any ammo for a long time. And also that means prices will go up. And we all know how bad that can get, this is probably the cheapest I've seen certain ammo calibers. The 9mm, I can get it for like $11 to $12 a box, you know, whereas though, you know, just a couple of months ago, maybe a year ago, 9mm was like 17, 18 bucks for like the cheapest brand you could get. So prices are starting to come down, but like I said, that could slowly shapeshift and go right back up, which is why, like, once again, you know, always make sure you guys buy ammo, man. Always make sure you try the best to add up to your stockpile. You know, I know a lot of us, you know, we go to the range, we train, you know, we use ammo a lot, especially if you go to the range often, you know, you're using ammo, you know, pretty frequent. So it's definitely good to always make sure, you know, you buying, especially if you're using a lot, you know, you want to buy often more. You know, as I always tell you guys, I don't get out as much as I want to the range. So I do sit on my ammo for a little amount of time before I have to go out and buy more, because I don't get to make as many range trips as I want to. But when I do go, I do use a fair amount. So regardless, I'm always buying ammo though. You know, every now and then I'll try to just get around to it, you know, even if it's like every other week or something like that, you know, buying a box 2 here, it'll add up. You know, you don't always got to go crazy, but always try to get what you can, because like I said, in today's situation, you know, we got war going on, we got plants getting shut down, companies being bought out. I mean, take AK ammo, for instance. You know, I haven't even took mine out just because it's been so scarce. Like, there's literally almost no websites that I can find cheap AK ammo, and any ammo for that matter. Like, there's some sites that I used that they're literally sold out of every 7.62x39 brand of ammo that you could think of. That's gone. Like, you can't find anything. It's all out of stock. Then there's some that do have 7.62x39, but it's very expensive because of the ban from the whole situation of Ukraine last year, and that's been going on for a while now. So like 7.62x39, I remember it was a time where it was only like $6, $7 a box, and that was only what, I don't know, I would say maybe about a year and a half, maybe not even 2 years ago when I first got mine. I was getting it for as cheap as $5.50 a box, and now you can't even find it. So, and if you do, like I said, it's not $6 or $7 anymore. You know, it's much more expensive as that. I don't normally get too much into prices. YouTube, you know, I don't condone the sale of any firearms or ammunition or for any of that matter, just in case. This is solely on just to give people some acknowledgement on, you know, how a lot of this stuff that takes place affects prices and things like that. But yeah, like I said, you know, the price of 7.62x39 has went up, you know, drastically since, you know, I first had mine up until now. It's almost like become like a rare caliber to even find for sale. So don't take what I'm saying lightly, because you're going to probably see a bunch of videos like this where people are talking about the ammo crisis, or if it even is an ammo crisis. I don't want to scare anybody. You know, I've been seeing a lot of people talking about panic buying, and that does tend to happen when you hear about the world news going on, and it has a lot to do with war. And, you know, like I said, especially ammunition plants getting shut down. And I believe it was Hornady that they had like a plant explosion. You know, things like that don't help, because that slows down production. So it all affects us in a lot of different ways. But at the end of the day, it comes back around to full circle to one thing, you know, ammo supply, you know, ammo shortages. And that tends to make people panic buy. So with me, I'm always buying ammo. Like I said, I mean, throughout the month, I might put about, you know, a couple orders in, you know, for ammo, just because, you know, I always try to just stock up. You know, I'm not buying 1,000 rounds each order, but, you know, obviously I'm buying a few rounds at a time, you know, just to kind of get it to add up. Over time, it will add up. You know, it's better to buy something than none. So, you know, this video is going to be a lot like my last video that, like I told you guys, I filmed, that I put out a couple months ago. But it is relevant to this topic because it just has a lot to do. I was literally just talking about this, about how it's important to just buy what you can, whenever you can, based on your situation. But regardless of whatever type of ammo you do buy, or what brand, or whether it's cheap or expensive, it's just always good to make sure you have something in your stockpile, because nothing's promised in today's world. As you can see, you know, things that we've never seen happen before are happening. And, you know, they're already trying to, you know, take rights away and things like that. And, you know, a lot of big, you know, agendas on gun control and stuff like that. So, you know, with the ammo shortages and potential ammo shortages, that doesn't help to the situation. So, you know, basically, it's just always good to keep an eye open and do your research, you know, when you do hear about things, because I was just hearing about it. And then, like I said, I did some research and I figured I'd put this video out for you guys just to hear me out. Like I said, you're probably going to see a million other videos by the time you watch this one about the same topic, you know. Like I said, don't panic. You know, I wouldn't panic, but definitely just keep your one eye open and definitely try to get some ammo whenever you can. Because, you know, you just don't want, you know, next month to come by and then next thing you know, there is a major shortage on more ammo. And then now you're, you know, out of luck, you know, and that's not going to be good for anyone, you know. So I feel like the more of a message this can get out to people, it's not to make you go panic buy. You know, I'm not saying to go buy 1,000 rounds of each caliber that you own right now. It's not anything like that. It's just more so for awareness, because back in 2020 when the pandemic happened, I wasn't aware of any of that stuff. You know, I wasn't aware that it was going to affect ammo shortages and things like that, you know, and I missed out, you know, and I was without ammo for a long time, you know, at least until I could find and get my hands on some good deals, because everything went so skyrocketed on prices. And, you know, I don't want that to happen again. So I always got my eyes peeled, you know, and when I hear about things like this, you know, I like to talk about it because it is a realistic situation. And some people might say, oh, you're overreacting and things like that. You know, a couple months ago, if you know, maybe heard me talking about ammo and how much you should have, you might think that I'm overreacting, because I have a lot of people tell me that. Even people that I know say that, you know, you're overreacting if you're buying too much ammo. You shouldn't have that much ammo. You know, it's not necessary, but it is necessary, because like I always say, there's no such thing as too much ammo. It's just like money. You can never have too much of it. And, you know, I'm always buying ammo because I do use my ammo. I mean, my ammo is not going to sit in the closet, you know, for years at a time before I go and shoot some of my guns. So it is necessary for me to buy ammo. And I think it's necessary for most people that own firearms to buy ammo, because, you know, you're out there training, you're doing things like that. So you just always want to have something in your stockpile. So like I said, you know, it's just best for you to do things like that, you know, and just like I said, always keep your eye aware, you know, one eye open, be aware of what's going on and things like that. And basically just, you know, hear what's going on, you know, and, you know, don't jump to conclusions, you know, because I didn't. I went and I basically, just like I said, I did some research. I watched a couple videos to see exactly what was going on, people explaining things. And like I said, I figured I'd just weigh in because it is a serious situation. And at the end of the day, you know, it's not something you should take lightly, because like I said, this is a situation that I will consider a SHTF situation, that I will consider it to be, because if it does get worse over the next few weeks or the next few months, just like with the Ukraine thing, you know, people thought, oh, you know, they're not going to be able to ban, you know, Russian ammo for too long. Well, look, here we are almost 2 years later, and it happened. And it's been very scarce to find 7.62 by 39. So if that happens with 5.56, it's going to get bad, because 5.56, you know, the prices on them are fair for a box, you know, but it probably won't be for much longer if this stuff keeps getting worse. So it can pretty much happen with any caliber, you know, and we're not promised anything. You know, it could happen with any caliber, you know, and in general, people will just start buying all types of ammunition, regardless of what it is, just because of, you know, the panic buying and, you know, the scarcity of everything. You know, you're going to get your hands on whatever you can when it comes down to it. So, you know, just, you know, like I said, guys, you know, just keep your eyes open, man. You know, make sure, you know, you got something in your stockpile. Like I said, man, I'm not telling you to go ahead and buy, you know, 10,000 rounds of ammo, you know, or panic buy for that matter. I don't want to make anybody panic. I'm just going off of things that I heard and read up on, and I figured I'd get the information out to y'all if you haven't already heard about it. And just some tips on, you know, how to do with your stockpile and, you know, and your ammo and stuff like that, you know, because at the end of the day, if that means I have to cut back on some range trips until, you know, prices go back down and, you know, ammo gets back on the shelf, then so be it, because God forbid things get worse. You know, we have war crisis going on and things like that. You never know what's going to happen tomorrow. So it's just really all about being aware. I probably said that a million times already, but, you know, because that's really what this video is about, is just being aware, having awareness on things that are going on related to this topic, you know, especially if you're into firearms and you're a gun enthusiast, you know, you stand for 2A, then this video will be relevant to you to watch, you know, because like I said, it's just weighing on everything that's relevant today and everything that's going on, you know, with the potential ammo crisis and things that could affect us as far as, you know, major U.S. Ammunition companies being bought out by foreign companies, war, and major ammunition companies, plants being shut down to the civilian market. You know, all that stuff comes into play when, you know, it comes to us and us civilians that we, you know, we stand for this stuff, you know. So basically that's the whole point of my video is to do that for you guys. You know, anytime I make a video, it's always about either learning something, you know, trying to show you guys something that you might have already known, but you know, you can hear it from me from a different perspective, you know. So like I said, guys, you know, I don't want nobody to panic. You know, at the end of the day, do what works for you, do what's best for you, and you know, whatever works for you, you know, then so be it, you know. But at the end of the day, you know, I don't want nobody to panic. I just feel, like I said, it's necessary for you guys to know what's going on, and you know, that's pretty much it, man. I know I probably done blabbered and said a bunch of things over and over, but, you know, I don't like to forget anything. And, you know, I like for you guys to understand where I'm coming from. And, you know, like I said, if you haven't already heard about it, then, well, you're hearing it now. So, you know, no need to panic, man. Just like I said, you know, just be aware and get as much, you know, ammunition as you can, as what works in your budget. You know, don't let nobody tell you different and say that you need a certain amount and things like that, because in a real life situation, you know, everybody's not going to be prepared like that. You know, if it comes down to it, you know, and war crisis and stuff like that, you know, it's just, you're only going to have what works for you. You know, not everybody can go out and buy 1,000, you know, to 3,000 rounds for each caliber. You know, at least not me. You know, maybe I might be saying some false stuff, you know, for some people, or they think it's not true, but, you know, I'm a regular person at the end of the day. And, you know, if I could afford that much ammo at once, I would. But like I said, man, I buy little by little, and I do what works for me. So that's why I say do what works for you. You know, take this video with a grain of salt, and just, you know, like I said, man, just stay aware, and, you know, just keep your eyes open. That's it, man. You know, to my 2A community, I appreciate y'all, man. And at the end of the day, you know, we stand together, man. I mean, at least we should, because, you know, it's us against them, you know, and not the other way around. So I'm gonna leave this video here for y'all, man. I appreciate y'all. Make sure y'all like the video. Leave a comment, subscribe. It all counts towards the algorithm, man, keeping me in the algorithms and moving. So I do appreciate that. And until next time, I'm gonna catch y'all, man. 100 gang, we out. Y'all be safe out there.